good vibrations.
Personal sovereignty and standing in our own unique God-given power as free, living, breathing men and women has been put forward many times as the ultimate solution to our shared problems this past year and a half. We do keep coming back to it in this series because it is the truth with a capital T. It's a message which, it seems, is certainly taking time to adequately get across to large numbers of people, which is hardly surprising considering how systematically it's been hidden from the people under layers of disinformation and fear-based mind control. But we're back on the case with it today with a concept which, when we get down to it, is actually incredibly simple. So this particular concept is known as the Sovereign Project, and I'm talking today with its originator, Peter Stone. Welcome on, Peter.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Is that a tautology, saying the same thing twice, Peter Stone? Because Peter means stone, doesn't it?
It does. I don't tend to use that name so much now, because obviously that's linked to my legal fiction,
Sure.
you know, the corporation. So most people refer to me as Sovereign Pete now, because so sort of like the local area that I'm in, everyone's sort of getting to know what I'm all about. So word's getting around quite quickly, and I'm becoming rather busy.
Yeah, good news. So in 2 or 3 minutes, if you can then, could you give the listeners just a brief bit of background about yourself and what inspired you to spearhead this project?
Sure, no worries. Very quickly, my background is engineering, fabrication work, metal work, electrical stuff, that sort of stuff. Now, I've always been suspicious of what was going on in the mainstream media and what the government was doing way back in like the late 80s, early 90s, when they started doing the global warming scam. And I was always looking into it, but on a casual basis. So over my time, I did plenty of research. So I researched the scam, which is global warming, and the fossil fuel scam, because fossil fuels don't actually exist. That's another scam. And then I ended up doing the 9/11, looking into 9/11. I found out that was an inside job. That led me on to the fiat currency system and how the global monetary system worked, and how the stock market worked. This led me to realize that there was going to be a planned global reset by around the year 2025, because the fiat system was going to come to an end. It's basically a Ponzi scheme. So I knew that they were planning something, and I knew in 2020 they were going to do a lockdown. And I was warning people in 2017, but everyone thought I was a crazy person. Anyway, so cut a long story short, I did try going political for a while. I stood for an MP in Leicester back in 2015, I think it was, because I was trying to warn people about the banking system and the reset and what the government's got planned for us. I wrote a book called The System, Death by a Thousand Cuts. That's trying to explain to people how the global system works on a simplistic level, so people can understand terminology like what is QE, what is fractional reserve banking, that sort of stuff, just to give people a basic understanding. But then when 2020 happened in March, I realized they were actually going to go ahead with it. It looks like the globalists were going to do it. And I knew that the governments didn't have the legal right to do it. In fact, they're bluffing. Okay, this is what people don't understand. They're bluffing. The governments are actually using the legal system, and they're not using law to do what they're doing. And a lot of it's a bluff, and a lot of it is tricking people into consenting to lockdown. Because lockdown was actually an offer. I know I sound crazy. A lot of people don't understand this. But if you understand the difference between lawful and illegal, and you understand what I like to use a general term called common law. Common law can mean different things to different people. So I just use it as a generic term. I like to use equity law and different layers of law, which I studied. But I realized the government was bluffing and people were panicking. So I decided to set up the Sovereign Project. And what this is designed to do is to give people back their sovereignty, which is their rights and freedoms. It's yours anyway. It's just people who've been tricked into giving it away. And they don't understand that they're actually consenting to contracts that takes away their rights and freedoms. It's not difficult to understand, but it does take some effort to learn this stuff. I suggest about 3-4 months of studying this, and then you'll know how the global system works. And once you know that, then you can be free. Once you're free, you can now push back against this system, and you can get back all your rights, all your freedoms, everything. And you'll realize, I keep saying this, and I want people to understand this, is these politicians, these central bankers, call them what you will, they are bluffing. They have no right to do what they're doing, and they're just playing on people's naivety because they don't know the difference between legal and lawful. So I've set the Sovereign Project up. I've got a website. I now hold a weekly workshop at a packed out venue. It's almost standing room only now. And these people are absolutely enjoying it. They're learning this stuff and they're sharing this stuff. And we need to get this information out to everybody. So that's just a general idea of what the Sovereign Project's all about.
Sure. And this is such important information. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, this is the most important information for everyone in this land and beyond to get their heads around right now in these times. It trumps everything else in terms of priorities, particularly when it comes down to the idea of things being made as offers rather than being any kind of binding law or requirements. So I'm sure we'll get into that more as we proceed.
Sure.
When we had a chat the other week, you outlined to me the different types of law, and it's kind of an umbrella system where certain types of law sit underneath certain others. Would you just give the listeners a run through of the different types of law that are out there and the validity of them?
Yeah, sure. Now, what tends to happen, a lot of people out there make the mistake and they think that law is just a single thing and it comes from an authority. Okay, this is a mistake. Law is not a single thing and it does not come from someone else. Okay, I need people to understand this. Law does not come from someone else. It does not come from a politician, and it does not come from someone else who writes it down on a piece of paper and says this is law. That's not a law, that is a policy. So law itself has a very deep history. I don't want to go into too much about it because it is quite complicated, but I'll just give you the basics. If you just give me a second, I'll actually bring it up for you. I've got multiple screens on my computer here. It looks like something out of something out of some 007 film. So I can bring up documents. So let me just bring up the highest to the lowest law. Just to make it, some people might disagree slightly with the order that I've put these laws in. It doesn't matter. We can have that debate another day. Okay, look, things are kicking off, right?
Let's get our freedom back first, and then we can have the arguments later.
I totally agree with you, Mark. Yes, there's too many people out there arguing. Their egos are getting in the way. Let's get our freedom back. Okay, let's stop all this tyranny. Let's stop the deaths. And stop all this, the wars going on and the poverty and the pedophilia and all this. Let's stop all that, and then we can have a discussion about law when we're all around the campfire singing Kumbaya. Okay, so all I've done is I've put these laws in an order just so the general person, the lay person, can understand it so they can digest it. So some people might disagree. It doesn't matter. So simplistically, you've got highest to the lowest laws. Now, I won't go into too much detail. And by the way, these documents are on my website. So if you want to know more, I'll give my website at the end. You can go on my website and you can download this. So there's a document on there called highest to the lowest law. So you've got eternal law, which is basically the mind of God. Now, I know some people out there might be not religious, okay? It doesn't matter if you're atheist or what religion you follow, but the law today, a common law, if you like, has the roots of God intertwined into it. It's just the way it is. I mean, if you go into a court and you swear on the Bible, okay, so some of you out there listening to this going, oh, it's a God thing. No, it's just history, and God is intertwined. And by the way, you can define your own God. So I'll leave that with you. So you've got eternal law, which is like the mind of God. You've got divine law, natural law, which is basically, good is to be done, evil is to be avoided. And then you've got universal law, which is basically ethics. Universal law is unwritten and unspoken. We know that murder is wrong. We know theft is wrong. It doesn't need to be written down, and you don't need to look it up. If you are a certain person who has to look up, is murder wrong, you're not a very good person. So these are the main laws that are actually above your sovereignty. Okay, these are things you can't control. Obviously, you can't control the universe, and you can't control natural law, you know, like gravity, for example. Then there's sovereignty, right? Now, what people need to understand is everything that follows from your own sovereignty requires your consent, okay? They're human laws. They've been made up by humans, and they require your consent. And this includes common law. So you've got human law, and what I like to use is equity law, okay? I know some people might understand what equity law is. It's basically the law of commerce. There is ecclesiastical law in there, deeds are in there, that sort of notices and affidavits are within equity law. I like to use equity law because it's very powerful, and this is the way we can fight back. Then underneath there, I call common law. Common law is a little bit more simplistic than equity law, and it's set up over centuries, but common law is different to different people. So you'll get different people giving different descriptions of what it is. You've got democratic law underneath this. By the way, democratic does not mean voting. Okay, that's another scam. Governments have tricked people into thinking that democracy means you vote for a political party and then they make the laws. That's not true. The word democratic is Latin, and it means sovereign people. In other words, the people make the law. The sovereign makes the law. So, and underneath that, we're going down lower and lower. We've got crown law. This is law from the monarchy. Okay, you can use these laws if you know what you're doing. Let me just touch on crown law. There's a lot of people there who are worried about at an airport. You go to an airport and they say you've got a quarantine. No, you don't. Quarantine is an offer. They are offering it to you. They cannot force you to have a quarantine. That violates crown law. Look at the first page on your passport. Okay, there is a decree by the Queen saying that no one holding this passport can be detained or stopped from traveling. If they do so, that's treason. So you can use crown law if you wish, and you can use it against the corporations and anyone tied to government. Underneath crown law, you've got constitutional law. Underneath that again, you've got government law. Now we're getting really low now. These laws, basically, they're not laws. They're colour of law. Okay, politicians like to drop that bit where they say colour of law and they just jump to law. No, it's colour of law, so it's masquerading as law, but it is not law. We're getting into contracts now. Underneath government law, you've got federal law. This is more in America. Underneath that, you've got state law. And now you're getting into an area that is so far removed from law, it's not even funny. And this is government legislation. Okay, so anything that's policy, statute, guidelines, acts, bills, mandates, we'll get into mandates in a bit, notices, rules, licenses, permits, regulations, warrants, diktats, anything like that is legislation, and they're no better than a service agreement. That's all they are. The government is asking, would you like to be, or would you like to accept this service agreement? And then if you give your consent, then these apply to you. If you don't give your consent, then none of these apply to you in any way, shape or form. So this document is on my website. You can download it. And just before I finish, I'd like to touch on what I call the sovereign postulates. Okay, this is very, very easy to remember for anyone out there. If you don't understand how law works, there's two basic questions that you ask yourself to see if what you're dealing with is in fact law. Number one, is it universally accepted? Okay, that's the first question you ask yourself. Is it universally accepted? In other words, does everyone on the planet agree with that law, i.e. murder? No one wants to be murdered, so that would be a law. Part two, the second question, is there a victim? Okay, if there is no victim, then no law has been broken and no crime has been committed, so it's not a law. So if someone comes up to you and says, oh, you've got to wear a mask, it's the law, well, let's just test that, shall we? Universally accepted. Well, no, it's not, because not everybody wants to wear a mask. And number two, if I don't wear a mask, is there a victim? No, there isn't. So that means it's not law, and what you're actually dealing with is policy. And if you didn't sign the policy agreement, then that does not apply to you. So hopefully that gives people a basic understanding between law and legislation.
Very well put. And it's very telling that the word police is directly derived from policy, because the police are there to uphold the policies put in place by their employers, the government. But again, policy is not law, right?
Absolutely correct. You're right. People get confused between policy enforcer, which is known as a policeman, and constable of the law. Okay, so what the government is doing, they're doing a little bit of bait and switch. So when a person, living, breathing man or woman, decides to be a policeman, they actually become a constable of law, and they swear an oath to that office. So they swear an oath to protect your rights and to uphold the law. Oh, by the way, it is never enforce the law. It is always uphold the law. The law is about balance. Okay, so you uphold the law, you don't enforce the law. So if you hear someone saying you're enforcing the law, no, they're enforcing policy, which means they're forcing a contract onto you, which is fraudulent and criminal. But yeah, so what happens is living, breathing man or woman wants to become a policeman. So they become a constable, they swear an oath to that, and then the following day they take the title of policeman. Now, a policeman enforces policy and has nothing to do with law in any way, shape, or form. Now, I'm not saying that these people who've decided to be policemen know what the scam is. They don't understand what they're doing. A lot of them have been brainwashed and they don't realize the damage they're causing. They've been basically taught parrot fashion. But sadly, every single policeman is what they're doing is they're committing fraud, because what they're trying to do is trick you into a contract. And once you've been tricked into a contract, they can then supply or hit you with a fine or punishment. A simple one is pulling you over in your car, and they will trick you. They will ask you something like, are you the driver of this vehicle? And if you say yes, then you've accepted the title of driver, which is an occupation. And now that police officer can enforce his policy onto you because you've accepted the title driver. Okay, so that's a dirty trick that these policemen use on you. And we've just got to touch on titles, by the way, so people understand how a hierarchy works. Your status is sovereign. It's not a title. Don't title yourself as sovereign. It is a status. And sovereign means supreme authority. You have the right to govern yourself and you make the law. That's what sovereign means. So it is a status. What the government does is they apply a title to you. If you accept that title, you have lost your status and you have lost your rights, and now the courts and the police and all the rest of them and the social services can now act on you. So these titles can be as simple as parent or Mr. or Mrs. or taxpayer. For example, if someone from the government asks you, are you a taxpayer? They're not asking if you pay tax. They're asking, will you accept the title taxpayer? If you accept that title, then you have to pay tax because you've consented to the title. So it's all about titles. But yes, unfortunately today, the police, if it's a policeman, they're only enforcing policy onto you. And what they're trying to do is not only they're trying to make money from you by the fines, but they actually securitize the documents you sign. So let's quickly just touch on your legal identity. I'm hoping some people understand this, but when you're born, a birth certificate is created, and then the government or the Vatican and the Bank of England, by the way, Bank of England has got nothing to do with England, it's a private bank, they attach a bond to your birth certificate, and then your income tax pays the interest on that bond for the rest of your life. Your income tax is split 60-40, 60 goes to the Vatican, 40 goes to the Bank of England. Now, what happens is that throughout your life, your income tax is not enough to pay the debt. And every time you agree to more government documentation, like marriage certificate, for example, that marriage certificate is securitized. They create more debt on top of that marriage certificate and they apply it to you. Therefore, you've got to pay more tax to pay the interest on the debt. So what the police are actually doing, when they pull you over and they give you a speeding ticket, for example, yes, they make money on the ticket itself. That money itself pays the judge's salary and pays the court-appointed lawyers and all this. That's their commission, if you like. But what happens is that speeding ticket is then securitized, which means they attach a bond to it, a debt, and then the debt is sold on the stock market, and then you have to pay more tax to cover this newly created debt. And that's why the average person today in England is paying 85% tax a year. So sadly, yes, you can't trust the police. If you deal with the police, get their identity, check their warrant card, and get them on the road. That's the very first thing you do. You don't get into a conversation with them. You don't answer any of their questions. You get them on their oath. And are you working on your oath today? When they say yes, great. You can now deal with them, and you only refer to them as constables. And when they're a constable, they cannot enforce policy onto you. It's a sad times that we can't trust police. I remember when I was a kid, I used to trust the police, but now I know how they work. I can't, and it's a sad place to be. I'm not blaming all policemen. A lot of them don't understand this scam, and they are part of the fraud themselves. But yes, it's very sad that we can't trust them anymore.
What if they answer that they're not acting on their oath?
Well, yes, if they actually respond. So you can ask the policeman, you can ask him 3 times, right? There's the law of 3. So if you ask someone 3 times and they fail to answer, then you can answer for them. Okay. So, and by the way, if you ever engage with the police, get it on your phone, get it recorded. I don't like smartphones, but I have one in my pocket, which is empty. There's nothing on there. It's got like 65 gig on it or 64 gigabytes memory on it, so I can record. Just record it. So you ask him, are you on your oath, working on your oath today? Now, he's got 3 chances to answer. If he does not answer, you can answer for him, and you can say, right, I'm going to answer for you, and the answer is no. So if he actually says that, if he actually says he's not working on it under his oath, then he's not a policeman, he's not a constable, he's committing a crime. So he's actually masquerading as a policeman, which is, I think, somewhere between 5 to 7 years imprisonment, I believe. But yes, so if he says he's not working under his oath, he's not a constable and he's not a policeman. And if he doesn't answer your question, you can answer for him, and you can say, right, I'm going to answer for you. And the answer is no. Therefore, you are not a policeman, you're not a constable, and you're acting fraudulently. It's a crime. You cannot masquerade as a policeman or a constable without declaring your oath.
Okay. You outlined a potential scenario in an airport there. And a few weeks ago, I wanted to make a trip to Ibiza, but I had to cancel it because it would have required me to take 2 of these bullshit PCR tests before being admitted back into England. It wasn't even a problem getting into Spain. It was just getting back into England. People are now faced with situations where, depending on the location, they're being asked to do these bullshit tests. They're being asked to quarantine when they get back or when they arrive. They're being required to wear masks. So it sounds, from what you were saying there, as if you can counter all of this and you can challenge the validity of what they're trying to make you do. But it's a situation that I've addressed on previous shows. If the average airport employee that they stick on the security gate is not familiar with the things that you're trying to put across, then you could find yourself arguing with him all day long, or you could find yourself being detained for several hours while you try to iron all this out and get someone far enough up the pecking order that understands how these things work. So you are faced with potential problems still, even when you try to assert yourself in your sovereignty, aren't you, right now?
You're absolutely correct. Basically, it's standing your ground. And I don't want to give anyone the false opinion that standing your ground is easy. It isn't. Okay, this is where you've got to be brave and you've got to stand your ground. You know, becoming brave means overcoming your fears. So that's quite a difficult question for me to answer because there's many levels to it. Which starts with your legal identity. Unfortunately, if you've got a passport, okay, and you've signed it, and you didn't sign it, all rights reserved, then what you've actually done is you've accepted the title of citizen. Depending on the age of your passport, and probably most passports today will say citizen, okay, and you've accepted the title citizen. Citizen basically means slave, okay, so you've accepted the title of slave, and that means that corporations can basically, or mainly government agencies, can force their policy onto you. Before it was citizen, it was subject. So, you know, passports from years ago, it was subject. You were subject to the crown. Now, a way to combat the passport is, unfortunately, your passport only refers to your legal identity. It does not refer to you in any way, shape, or form. Now, you can still use these passports if you know what you're doing. Now, the first thing to do is sign it, all rights reserved. So if you sign it, all rights reserved, it means you're only using it for identification and you're not using it, and you're not accepting, all the privileges and benefits. I mean, this is a joke. It's the same with your driver's license, okay? If you just get your driver's license and you sign it, you've accepted the benefits and privileges. Now, in the eyes of the benefits and privileges, in the eyes of the government, the benefits and privileges are parking tickets, speeding tickets, and all this sort of stuff. So I don't see the benefit. But it's the same with your passport. If you just signed it, then you're going to receive all the benefits of being a citizen, which means you are obligated to follow all the policies. However, if you sign it all rights reserved, then you've reserved all your rights, and you're now only using that passport as a form of identification. Now, it would help if you've actually got your affidavit of status on file. So the way to combat your legal identity, and everybody, unfortunately, today is almost tied to their legal identity. Okay, everywhere you go, it's always Mr. Smith or whatever, or Mrs. Smith. Okay, that's your legal identity. It's a corporation. It doesn't apply to you. So to combat this, you need an affidavit of status. So what this does is it's a declaration of your status as a living, breathing man or woman, and as one of sovereign. You get it filed with the courts. Once it's filed with the courts, you're ready to go. So if you're in an airport, what you've got to do is ignore legal fictions, right? This is where people start panicking. They go, like the airport, for example. That's a legal fiction, Virgin Airways, legal fiction. It doesn't exist. It's written down on a piece of paper. It's just the name of a company. You've got to make it personal, right? You've got to look at the person you're dealing with. So if you go into an airport and some low-ranking person comes up to you and says, oh, you've got to take a quarantine, again, get it recorded. But what you need to do is you decline the offer. Always decline. Never refuse. Okay, this is a mistake. And do not use exemptions. If you use exemptions or you refuse, then what you're doing is you're agreeing to a prior obligation. Okay, so if you refuse, so if you go into an airport and say, oh, no, I'm refusing to do the quarantine, then yes, you'll probably be arrested, because it means you agree that you should have done the quarantine, but now you're refusing to do it. It's a prior obligation. This is how these people think. It's not lawful. This is completely fraudulent. This is not how contracts work, but they do it anyway. Another one is an exemption. People say, oh, I'll use the exemption. No, if you use that, you're accepting all the nonsense the government comes out with. You accept the contract given out by the government. So the government's saying, Coronavirus Act 2020, which, by the way, isn't even switched on. It's not even live. But anyway, so they'll try and apply it to you. But if you say I'm exempt, that means you're accepting the Coronavirus Act 2020. So you're accepting the contract from government, but you are now saying I'm exempt. So what you do is you decline. So you go to the airport and you say, oh, you've got to have a quarantine. You say, thank you very much, offer declined. Okay, now if that person starts to have a go at you and says, no, you've got to do it, right? This is where mandates come in. People need to know how mandates work. Let me just touch on mandates. A mandate only applies to you if you have signed a contract agreeing to the mandate prior to the mandate. Okay, I hope everybody understands that. No one can enforce a mandate onto you without that contract. Okay, so if you did not agree to the mandate and you did not sign a contract agreeing to the mandate, then if anyone tries to apply a mandate onto you, they're committing a crime. They're violating your rights, they're violating your freedoms, they're trespassing against your estate, they're causing what is called a tort, which is a torturous act. It's a crime. You can now go after these people.
They wouldn't try and claim that when you booked your airline ticket, that was you entering into this contract. Could they try and claim that?
They could. They could try that. However, when you actually fill out the paperwork to fly on their airlines, you're not filling out a contract. You're filling out a service agreement. There's a big difference between a contract and a service agreement. For something to be an actual contract, a very real contract that stands up in a court of law, and I'm talking about common law, genuine law, not these nonsense courts we have today, administrative courts. I'm talking about law, court of law. For it to be a contract, it must have the minimum of 2 signatures on it, which will be yours and the other person you have a contract with. So if you book a flight or whatever, what you're actually signing is a service agreement. There is no second signature. There is no second person. You've signed a service agreement with a legal fiction. That means you control the document because you're the one who charged the document with your signature. No one can challenge you because the only person who can challenge you on that document you signed would be the person who also signed it with you. So I hope I'm making sense, right? So a genuine contract requires two signatures. So if you break the contract, then the other person who also signed the contract can then make a claim against you and say you broke the contract, right? Because it's about rights. Rights only apply to living, breathing men or women. Legal fictions, corporations do not have rights. They don't exist. So the legal fiction cannot force you into quarantine or anything like that because there is no person on the other end. There's only a legal fiction and it doesn't exist. So I hope that covers how contracts work. So even though you've signed a piece of paper and you've accepted to fly on their airlines, it does not give them the right to force you to do things you don't want to do. And again, if you did sign that service agreement, sign it, all rights reserved, okay? Put it underneath your signature. So before you sign any document, especially if you're dealing with corporations, governments, that sort of thing, before you sign, and this is important, you can't do it afterwards. So before you sign, you write all rights reserved. Then you sign, and when you sign your name, make sure that your signature overlaps the all rights reserved. That means no matter what the contract says, all your rights are reserved. So you can go on a plane, fill out the form, and then you signed all rights reserved. And if someone tries to say, oh no, you've got to have a quarantine, the very first thing you should ask that person, well, after you've got their information, so you get their name, you get their identification, and then you say, okay, under what authority are you forcing me to go into quarantine? And they have none because you never gave it. Authority comes from yourself, okay? So for someone to be able to tell you what to do, you must give your authority to them. Everybody does this when they start a new job, okay? You sign a contract and then you give authority to your boss to tell you what to do. But your boss can only tell you what to do in the confines of that contract. That's it. He can't tell you to wear a mask. He can't tell you to have an injection. He can't tell you to do anything that does not pertain to that contract. It's the same for the airport. So if you've got someone, you're in the airport, you walk in there and some employee says, right, you've got to have a quarantine. And you've declined it, remember, you've declined it. You've declined the quarantine. And then they turn around and say, no, you've got to do it. At that point, you give them a forewarning. You say, well, I'm going to have to give you a forewarning because what you're doing is a crime. And then you'll say, under what authority do you have the right to force me to have or to go into quarantine? And you direct it at that person, right? Forget everything else. Forget the airport. Forget the police. Forget the government. They don't exist. You're dealing with that person directly. You got his name. If his name's Billy Bob, you deal with Billy Bob. Right? I don't care about anyone else. It's Billy Bob who's telling you you've got to go into quarantine. I don't care if they're, a lowly worker on minimum wage. He is violating my rights. I'm now going to go after Billy Bob. All right? So you escalate it. So you tell Billy Bob, right, you're trying to mandate me, aren't you? You've just mandated that I've got to have a quarantine. That's a crime. I've got it on camera and I've got it recorded. You do not have the contract to enforce a mandate, and you do not have the authority because I did not give it. And I'll say, right, get your supervisor down here. You get your supervisor down here, and then you notify the supervisor that an employee has violated your rights. And then you say to the supervisor, what do you want to do? You put it in their hands. You get the name of the supervisor. And you say, look, I'm going to sue this employee for £10,000 for violating my rights. And then you say to the supervisor, what do you want to do? Punish this employee? Or do you want to sack him? Or do you want to be on his side? Because if you want to be on his side, you want to back him up, I'm coming after you for 50 grand. And then you escalate it again. And then you send a notice to the board of directors, not by their title, but by name. And you say, look, I've had 2 employees here. They did not allow me to board the plane or whatever it was they were doing because I had to leave. They would not let me board, or they forced me to do a quarantine, if that's how you want to play it. And then you say, right, I'm now charging you 1.5 million for violation of my rights. So, I mean, if you actually are forced to do a quarantine, you can give them notice and say, right, well, I charge £10,000 an hour. And then after your 14 days, you add that up and say, right, you owe me this. And then you go after the board of directors and you do it through your own paperwork. You don't use their paperwork. You use notices and affidavits, and you use your own court. You do it at home and you file it through the court system. So hopefully that's given some people out there some pointers on how to deal with it. Make it personal and ignore legal fictions. You cannot sue corporations. Corporations don't exist, so you can't sue them. Sue the people, and don't use their titles. Ignore their titles. You sue them as living, breathing men or women. So hopefully that's answered the question.
Sure. And I think the most likely outcome from that scenario is that poor old Billy Bob would just lose his job to save the manager's ass.
Yes, that's exactly right. Because if you show you mean business, and then you start sending notices to the CEO, then yes, Billy Bob's going to get the sack, because that's what they'll do. They will be a sacrificial lamb, and they'll just be removed. And the corporation or the owners of the corporation might give you a little payout and say, look, ever so sorry, we apologise, is £1,000 compensation, and we've disciplined the person who's no longer working for us. So, okay, Billy Bob got caught in a crossfire, but this is how you're going to have to win this war. There's going to be some collateral damage, unfortunately. And at the end of the day, you can't hide behind your job anymore. Okay, saying I'm just doing my job doesn't cut it. All right, it didn't work for the German soldiers during World War II. It doesn't work. You judge people on their actions, and you say, look, you're violating my rights. I'm going to judge you on your actions. But that's how it works.
That's right. And it's not going to work for all these corrupt doctors, big pharma employees, mainstream media reporters, police, judiciary, celebrities, everyone else that's been complicit in this monumental scam when the truth about it comes out, which I'm very confident it will. It might take some time, but they're not going to keep the lid on this one. It is going to get exposed for what it is, and everyone that's been complicit is going to stand fully judged for their part in it. Just my
totally agree.
Little thoughts there. So you said to decline rather than refuse the offer of a contract, but would a conditional acceptance not apply? I'm hearing a lot these days about conditional acceptances. Is there validity to those?
Yes, you can actually do that. That might be a way forward. Remedy works in many, many different ways. It depends on the situation, right? I can understand that you've got some small businesses out there and they're feeling pressured to apply this, these draconian policies onto their employees. And maybe your employee has a good job and they're friends with the boss or something like that. You don't want to cause major waves. So it depends on the situation, but there's two ways of handling it. First of all, you can go full board and you go, right, I'm now actually going to sue you. I'm going to make a counterclaim against you. You've mandated me without a contract, which is a tortuous act. It's fraud. I'm going to go after you, and I want a compensation, which you can do that if you want. If you want to go after your employee or shopkeeper or anybody, you can do that. Or if you think, you know what, I want to do a compromise. I want to do, I just want to put it behind me. I just want to get rid of this situation. Then yes, you can give them a notice of conditional acceptance. So what this tends to do is that you would serve notice. And what you need to do is, everyone out there, do not serve notices to legal fictions, right? You cannot serve notice to a corporation. If you work for McDonald's, you cannot serve notice to McDonald's. You can only serve notice to a living, breathing man or woman. It's the only way these notices work. Never, ever sign a notice to whom it may concern, or dear sir or madam, because your notice will just end up in the bin. It has to be to a name, and it must not include their title. So if you're going to do a notice, it will say to Billy Bob. And if Billy Bob is CEO, you put his title underneath and go title CEO, whatever, or doctor, whatever, but you put it in their name. But anyway, yeah, you can do a notice of conditional acceptance. So you'd go in there and you say, okay, you might like your boss, and you're giving him a way out. So you go, okay, boss, I will take the jib jab, and as long as you will agree to the following. And it will be something like, if I'm paralyzed, you agree to pay me £1 million, or if I die from blood clots, you'll pay my family £5 million, or whatever it is. You can put all that in there. You hand it to the boss by name, give it to him by name. Now he has a choice. He can either accept that, which I very much doubt it, or it's checkmate because you can't go any further. Because you've been respectful, you are with honor, you've accepted what he said to you, and you've just put some extra conditions and say, okay, I am now making a counter offer. So it's up to him to accept it or decline. So you've checkmated the situation and it can't go any further. So yes, that is a way to do it. If you want to make it a little bit easier for your boss, if you like your boss and all that sort of stuff.
And you mentioned there writing all rights reserved across a passport, for example, to change the status of it. Is that literally all you need to do? And what do you do? Write it in a Sharpie pen across the title page or somewhere else?
Right.
And is that all you need to write?
Yes, but you have to write all rights reserved before you sign the passport, not after. Because once you've signed any document, okay, and then you add to it, that can be considered fraud. Okay, so you can't add things after you've signed it. So if you've already signed your passport and you didn't put all rights reserved on there, then I don't know, get rid of it, get another one. And then when the new one turns up, then you write all rights reserved and then you sign it afterwards. Now, what you can do is you can get someone to witness this. So, and this is where we've got to start learning to get out of using phone calls and using their documentation. Yeah, I just want to touch on that. Never, ever use government or corporate paperwork. Always use your own, because government corporate paperwork is set up to trap you. They'll put tick boxes in there and they go, oh, isn't that convenient? They put little tick boxes in there like, what's your title? And then you look for Mr. Oh, lovely, I'll just tick Mr. Well, you're just handing over all your rights and freedoms and you've lost your status. You never fill out their forms. But anyway, going back to witnesses, is if you want to do this, then you can get someone who will witness it, or two witnesses are better. And then they will witness that you signed that passport, all rights reserved, and they will fill out a declaration of truth, something like that, to say that they witnessed you doing it. And you can even record yourself doing it as well on the camera. And you go, there you go, all rights reserved, then I've signed it. And that's your basically evidence. So if ever you are challenged on this, you can then bring this to court and say, well, there's my video evidence. I've signed it, all rights reserved. And I've got two witnesses with a declaration of truth saying they witnessed me signing my passport, all rights reserved. So people have got to get used to creating evidence and witnesses to protect themselves. Now, if you're going to do the passport thing, again, I'll try and do a affidavit of status first and get that filed. And then you can start referring to your living, breathing identity if you end up in their courts. But you don't want to be ending up in their courts. And there are ways to short circuit their courts anyway, because they're all fraudulent, they're all administrative, they're all corporate. And if you go to any of these courts, you've lost your status, you've lost your rights from day one. And this is where a lot of people are going wrong. They think, I know, I'm going to go to court and fight this. Well, that's the first mistake. You don't go to court. Your court is with you all the time. If you go to court, you're going to someone else's court. And if you walk through those gates, you're accepting their jurisdiction. Now they have jurisdiction over you, and then they'll ask for a title and say, are you a defendant? Are you a plaintiff or whatever? And you say, yes. You've lost your freedom, your rights, your status. So you've entered into an administrative court, you've lost from day one. So what you need to learn is to say that your court is with you all the time. It's your court. The sovereign decrees the law, and their court is with you all the time. You can go to a courthouse with a courtroom where you hold your court. Yes, you can do that, but you can't go to court because it's someone else's court. So I just wanted to touch on that as well. There's many layers to this, and people need to learn it all to understand how the system works. When you understand how the system works, you can protect yourself against it.
I'm just trying to imagine someone who's never come across any of this information before and has spent their life watching the BBC Evening News and believing the government is telling them the truth, how much this would melt their mind. And they'd have to listen to this show about 30 times to get inside what you're saying. It would be a real mind blower for people. And many people are coming to these realizations for the first time, as we know, as a result of the scamdemic, because they write to me every single day and say, I've just woken up and all this stuff is blowing my mind. So there's new recruits coming on board every day that are encountering this information for the first time. And it's just incredible that we've spent our entire lives being deceived in this way. And they have to resort to this trickery and these sneaky little tactics. You know, they're devious bastards. They can only get away with what they do through trickery and being sneaky and snidey and snitchy. It just, you know, speaks so much to their true nature that they have to hide the truth under all these layers of duplicity, doesn't it?
Absolutely right. I mean, these people are sniveling, backstabbing. I don't want to swear or anything like that, but my God, when you realise,
go ahead.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to teach myself not to swear and not to lose my temper, because when you research what they've been doing, right? I mean, wage compression and poverty and the wars and the paedophile rings and it's trillions they've stolen from us. Trillions they've stolen and have used it to create misery and death to millions, if not billions of people for decades and almost centuries. If you realize what these people are doing, they are sniveling, backstabbing. They've got no courage. They've got no honor. They've got no respect. Now, the only way you can fight back against these people is to ignore the legal fiction and ignore their title and go after them personally, okay, by name, one by one. Okay, people have got to start to learn that you cannot go after corporate fictions and legal fictions that don't exist. This is how these people operate. Okay, they operate because they hide behind these titles. Well, we strip them of their titles and go, no, we're going to go after you by name. And you will see how they run. I mean, I've used this tactic many, many times, and I've created many remedies over my time. As soon as you start making it personal and you go after these corporations, you'll find that things happen very quickly. And all of a sudden, they're apologizing and you get given compensation and all the rest of it. So, in fact, I've got two people now in the workshop. We hold a weekly workshop. We're part of the fraternity now. We've got members all over the world. So they're joining the fraternity to push back against this and learn how it works. But anyway, we've got two members of the fraternity, and they're actually pushing back against council tax. And they're learning at an incredibly fast rate. And they're learning how to read the fraudulent documents. And you look at it, and it's like the council tax. They'll send you a council tax bill. There's no signature on it. There's no contract between me and the council to pay this council tax. So they're learning this. They're realizing it's in your face. It really is. We've all seen that film, They Live, with the sunglasses, and you lift, and you can see what the signs are actually saying, obey and all this.
Yeah.
Well, I teach people this. I give them the sunglasses, and then I show them how to read legal documents, and they can see it now. And they can see their legal identity on there. They can see that these documents for demands for payments, there's no signature on it. So that means the document's toilet paper. It has no lawful or legal standing. And now they're learning is they don't go after the council by name. They find a person who works for the council. You've got one name and you go after that person and you redirect it to that one person. Also send them a fee schedule. So every time the council sends you a notice that you've got to pay your council tax and you're dealing with it, you say, right, well, I now have to respond to this and now I'm going to charge you 350 quid. So you send them a fee schedule. So every time you do a reply, you say, right, I'm replying to this and this is where you've gone wrong. And I'm now adding 350 quid to my bill and you owe me $2,000 to date. But these people are enjoying it. They're loving it because this is not taught in schools. How to read legal documents and to see the fraud. But once you see the fraud and you know how to do your documents, you know how to do notices, which is another thing I teach in the workshop. I teach people how to do notices. When you know how to do all this and you start sending them off, you'll see that these people within government, they run a mile. They panic and they don't want anything to do with it. Now, at the moment, it's only a handful of us doing this, but can you imagine if I can get, say, 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 people all in England, all sending notices to all these MPs and all these people who work in the council. They're going to be swamped. Sending notices to judges because they're not working under their oath, have violated their oath. given him notice of distress. You know, this is going to be an avalanche of paperwork coming from people who now know how to use the paperwork and now know how to use common law stroke equity law. And people are hungry for this information. They really are. And I'm trying to get this sovereign project out there, and I want to set up more workshops all over the country in different venues. So if people out there want to get in contact with me and want to learn this and then hold their own workshops, and that's what I want to do, is get other people out there doing the PowerPoints. We've got PowerPoints you can have, and we've got handouts you can print off, and you hand them out to your audience, and then you start teaching this. And I'm telling you, they'll come. Every Thursday night, the place is packed, standing room only, and people from all over are traveling because they want to know how this paperwork works.
Sure. Let's recap some more on that at the end. And
Yes.
As you said, there's only a few people involved at the moment as we record this show, but I've got a feeling that once this show has been put out, there's going to be a whole load more. In your view, is what you're proposing here the only style of action that's going to cut it, that's really going to get results, over and above things like taking it to the streets, protests, this sort of thing? Do you think this is the only way we're going to get real change?
Yes, I think so. I think it was I forgot the name of the author, The Art of War. I think to defeat your enemy, you've got to become your enemy, which means you've got to understand how your enemy works. And so many people don't understand the system, and they're going off in the wrong direction. Now, protests are pros and cons. The pro on a protest is to show numbers, which is great. You know, to see the numbers on the street is fantastic. However, if you're actually protesting, you've lost your status, okay? Because you've got to ask yourself, why are you protesting? Is there a contract between you and the person that you disagree with? And no, there isn't. So why are you protesting? And then, who are you protesting? Are you protesting the government? Well, the government doesn't exist. That's a legal fiction. And as we find out, we will know that petitions is the same thing. You don't petition. Why are you petitioning government? Government doesn't exist. And why are you petitioning an entity, if you like, if you don't have a contract with it? So petitions and protests sadly don't work. And this is why governments actually promote it. We found that many protests and petitions are actually set up by government themselves, or the people who control government, should I say. That's to legitimize government. That's what they're doing, okay? And then, of course, once you have a protest, then you have the police that go in, and then they cause the violence. And then the BBC record it, and then, of course, they put out the propaganda and say, oh, look at all these anti-vaxxers, blah, 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 causing violence. So, but I do see a shift. I see people, instead of protesting, they're now just enjoying their freedom. So it's a freedom march now. So you're just out enjoying the day with all your friends. We're just having some freedom now. We're just, you know, that's better. Because if you realize that the government doesn't exist, then you turn your back on it, then it has no legitimacy. It shrinks, it evaporates, it goes away.
A lot of people criticize these events, shall we call them, and they say, oh, they've just become social occasions where people get together and just enjoy the day in the sunshine. And what's so wrong with that? Given the circumstances we've all lived through for the last year and a half, I think there's actually some value in large numbers of people getting together, as you say, enjoying their freedom, socializing. Why is that such a bad thing?
You're absolutely correct. That's the positive side, okay? There's too many people out there that can't see both sides of the coin, and they always say everything's a psyop, or everyone's a shill, okay? Or everyone is, you know, I'm tired of that, okay? Just take the truth. So, yes, there are people out there that are controlled opposition, absolutely, but just take the truth. Controlled opposition only works where there's some truth to it. And then it's truth with a layer of propaganda. We'll strip off the propaganda and just take the truth. So the government's using this, or the people who control government are using controlled opposition, but it's a very dangerous tactic because they know they have to use some truth. So when people can focus on that, this is when they lose their power. But you're right, you know, people just gathering together, families and children, and just mingling with other people that don't have masks on, and, you know, be human for once, you know, and just enjoying being social is great. You know, this is, you know, it lifts the spirits. And not only that, but these people are talking, they're sharing information. This is, you know, I think there was over 2 million at the London March, just something, or it was massive. And just think how many people were sharing tidbits of information then.
That's right.
Great,
I mean, it all helps. It all helps. It's all steps in the right direction.
Absolutely. And what you do is fantastic. You're out there, you're on the front line. You've got to do this. We need people like you to do this. I'm more in the shadows myself. I'm doing the paperwork and I'm doing stuff, that's not so, shall we say, visible. I don't really have a YouTube channel or anything like that, or any real social following. But what you do, you're on the front lines, you're visible and you're out there, we need people like you.
Well, I think you might be out front yourself a little bit more after this show. So
I think so.
Get ready for that. Yeah. Your project is closely tied to equity law, or that's a major part of it. And you outlined the different laws earlier on in the show. Yes. But equity law is the one by which the so-called elites operate. Could you just explain a little bit about how this one differs from the others?
Right, yes. Okay. Now, it's a bit difficult. I mean, you can go back. I've been researching law for months, years, It's a fascinating subject, and I could talk for hours, and there's people that would disagree with me. But very simplistically, they had common law. The idea of common law, before common law, there was the monarchy, right? So the king ruled by decree. He was sovereign. Everyone else was subjects. Then the Magna Carta was written. That was effectively constitutional law, really, because it was a contract between the monarchy and the barons. Okay, so that was the first contract. But this is the first idea that law applied to everybody, and the king was not above the law. So this is where the common law sprang from. Now, common law is a little bit limited if that's all you're concentrating on. Now, over the centuries, equity law ran alongside common law, and it's to do with contracts and commerce. Now, it's got some very good points in there, like notices and affidavits and stuff like this, which is very useful tools. But unfortunately, a lot of it has been hijacked, if you like, by the Vatican, which, again, it depends how deep you want to go. But a lot of people think the Vatican is Christian or Catholics, but it's not. It's sort of hijacked by a group of people behind it. So they hide behind Christianity. So law is basically based on Christianity, but that itself has been hijacked. So you've got ecclesiastical law, which is basically the Vatican law, and they've sort of hijacked, in a way, deeds and affidavits and some notices, if you like. That's where it lives. And trust law as well. Trust law is created within ecclesiastical law. Now, this is, as you're completely right. This is what all the, Rothschilds and all these, the royal family, that's what they use, because they've created the system that has enslaved us all, which is called the legal system, right? Now, I want everyone to understand this. If you ever hear the word legal or illegal, it's referring to a contract only, okay? So I want to repeat that. Legal or illegal does not refer to law. That would be lawful and unlawful. So these families, these dynastic families that go back centuries, over time have created the legal system. This is driver's licenses, tax, statutes, all this, marriage certificates. Oh, by the way, yeah, your marriage certificate is securitized and it's creating more debt on your name. But anyway, so everyone has been brainwashed and conditioned to believe that they should live in this legal system, okay? And they think, oh, I've got to register my car with DVLA. If you do that, you've handed over ownership of your car to DVLA. Anyway, so everyone's conditioned to live in the legal system using their legal names. But the Rothschilds and the royal family and all the rest of them, they don't use any of this. They know it doesn't apply to them. They use equity law. So that's why they have trusts. That's why they don't pay any tax. So another word for trust is foundation. And we've all heard of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and all the rest of them, the Hillary Clinton or the Clinton Foundation. They're trusts. And what they do is they split ownership and usage of a house, a car, an asset. and then they put it into a trust. So it's tax-free, they don't have to pay tax on it, and they have full use of it. And what they can do is also they transfer this wealth down to their lineage, so that it will be passed over to their children using a trust. Don't use wills. A will is part of the legal system, and it's a scam. A will is used by solicitors to rip you off. So what happens is when you die and you transfer your estate to your children, the lawyers take a massive cut, usually thousands of pounds, and then the taxman takes a massive cut as well, and you pay inheritance tax. So don't use wills. Put everything into a trust. You put it into a private family trust, and then when your time comes and you die and you pass it on to your children, it's just simply passed over to them. They're trustees. There's no payments. So yes, the Rothschilds, they use equity law, they use affidavits, and they do not deal with legal fictions or anything like that. So that's what I deal with, and that's what I want the average person out there to learn. Learn how affidavits work, learn how notices work, and realize the legal system has no legal standing with you. So that's hopefully that makes it a little bit clearer for people.
Absolutely. So we've spent a long time setting it up here, but it's all been great information. But to get down to the nitty gritty, I get emails daily from people saying, I feel so powerless. I want to do something to help, but I just don't know what. And these would appear to be the very people that you're seeking to get on board with this project. So what are some of the practical ways in which people who feel like that can get involved here?
Yes, first thing is to go onto my website. It's free. There is no charge, and there's no paywall. Okay, there is a sign-in. We had to put a sign-in there because obviously it protects us from the bots doing multiple downloads. But what it'll do is it'll just ask you simple, like take an oath, which will be do no harm and help your fellow sovereign, that sort of thing, and then sign in. And you want to have access to all these documents. You can download it and you can read it and learn it. Now, I'm based in Leicester. I hold a workshop every Thursday. We are maxed out at this venue. I'm trying to train people up so they can hold the same workshop in other venues. If people want to learn this and want to help me do that, then get in touch. I wish I could help everybody. I really could, but I need people to learn this, get to the sort of same level that I'm at, and then they can go off and then they can teach others. But just learn the difference between lawful and legal. Okay, that's a start. Just begin with that. Realize that if you hear the word legal or illegal, it refers to a contract. And then the next question you should ask is, did I sign that contract? And the answer is no. So it cannot be illegal for you because you did not breach the contract because you didn't sign the contract. So just learn that. And another one, I want people are panicking all over the world about mandates. No, you cannot be mandated unless you agreed to the mandate through a contract. You have to have signed a contract with another person before the mandate can be lawful or legal. And the only person who can mandate you to do anything is the person who signed the contract with you. That's it. That's how mandates work. If someone tries to mandate you without a contract, it's a crime. They are violating your rights. So just those two simple things. Learn that. Learn the sovereign postulate so you can tell the difference between a law and legislation. Do that. And then just get people to sign up to the website. Start promoting it. Use social media. Go out there. We have a Facebook page. I know I don't like Facebook myself, but we have one. We have a Telegram group called, I believe, the Leicester Tribe. We're working with the Stand in the Park movement, so we've got connections with them. Where we work with the Guardians 300. We've got fraternity members that are now signed up to do the constable course with the Guardians 300. So we're getting networked. I'm dealing with a chap called, I have his name here somewhere, Lyndon Farrington, with the Beep Extra. We're trying to set up a cryptocurrency so we can get out the fiat system. I'm also trying to set up a actual note that's impregnated with real gold, okay? But I'm going to need numbers on that. More people who join, and if I get, say, 100,000, 200,000 members, and we're all interested in this gold note made from real gold, and I think I can make that happen. There's a company in America that does this. There's a small town in Iowa, I believe, and they don't use the dollar anymore, or they sort of use the dollar, but side by side, they also use what is called a gold back, which is a note made from gold. So I want to sort of do a England version of that, if that makes sense, or a sovereign note. And there's plenty more inside this sovereign project. There's many more things part of, just being sovereign is part of it. I want to help people with their debts. There is no debt. People need to understand that what's going on with debts is that it's your signature that has been securitized. So like a mortgage, for example, you go into a mortgage company, you sign a mortgage agreement for $250,000. What you've just done is created the $250,000 using your signature. It's yours. Okay, you can just go off and buy the house without any debt if you wanted. But no, the mortgage company take that $250,000 you created with your signature, and then they give it back to you as a fake loan, and then you spend 25 years paying it back with interest. There is no debt. It's a scam. So if people understand how the financial system works, and you understand there's no credit card debt either, it's the same thing. So there's a lot more involved in the Sovereign project, and I cover many other areas. There's one about sovereign health. We want to get people back their health. I would say to people out there, please don't eat supermarket food. Stay away from the E numbers. They're not good for you. Don't listen to the National Health on nutrition. They don't know anything about it. They try and get you to eat carbs and breads and grains. Stay away from that. No good. Stay away from the sugars. So anyway, we're trying to get away from, the negative side effects, like chemotherapy in cancer. We know the cure for cancer now. So why doesn't the National Health help people with cancer? So that's another question. We're trying to do sovereign homeschooling. So the idea is a lot of people want to get their children out of school and school them themselves, right? But they fear having a knock on the door from social services. Well, if you're a fraternity member, you're not connected. So if social services comes knocking on your door, you get that person's name and address, and then the fraternity is going to go after them. And we'll show you how to do it. And we'll have the Guardians 300 on our side as well. So you'll be protected. So we're setting this up. We'll get the homeschooling going, and the health, and businesses also. If there's businesses out there that want to step out of the system and want to deal with, normal people for a change, get in touch, get networked, and we're doing that now in Leicester. So there's a lot going on. When I started this, I had no idea how busy I would be. It's almost full time now, which is fine. I keep going because the people I'm helping, I see them every day. I see the fear is gone. They shake my hand. They thank me over and over. They enjoy it. They enjoy life again. They see a way out. I've given them the way out. And there is a way out. There is a back door to this system if you know how to do it, if you learn this stuff. So yes, there is a lot going in the background. I better give you my website. Keep mentioning it, but I haven't given it out there. So the website is thesovereignproject.live. And there's a Facebook page, which is the Sovereign Project, and there's a Facebook group. It's a private group, which is the Sovereign Fraternity. We have general inquiries and collaborations on the website, but can I please ask anyone out there, please don't get in contact with us about your individual problems. Don't get in contact with us and say, oh, I've got a parking ticket, what can I do? My team is busy. We have a small team. We can't deal with loads of people asking questions. So if it's a genuine question, please get in touch. If you want to help us, please get in touch. And I'm looking for a graphic designer and a leaflet designer. If anyone out there can do graphic design work, leaflet design work, get in touch, please, and you can help us out. But yeah, a lot going on.
Absolutely. And the key to so much is just getting more teachers on board, because a dynamic I've noticed taking place in recent times is there's a small number of people doing pretty much everything. And then others, because they lack the skills or the know-how, are just trying to put more and more on that small number of people and saying, you need to do this, you need to do that. Well, what we actually need is more people who are capable of doing this themselves, so they don't need to go to those that are already doing it and dumping more on their workload, but they take it on themselves. We need more teachers, more people stepping up. There's only so much you can do. There's only so much any one individual can do. So getting teachers trained up to be able to help others is so key to this.
Yes, you're absolutely correct on that. And I want to tell everybody out there there's two truths to this. I don't know whether it's spiritual or something to do with the universe. I don't know. I'll have that conversation one day. However, there's two truths. Number one, the government cannot do anything to you unless you consent. And the government is telling you. They have to tell you. It's weird. Every time I research something, they're telling you what they're going to do. Like, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, Event 201. They tell you this. And they can't act unless you actually consent. So that's the first thing.
They want to get a situation where nobody can legitimately make the claim that they weren't in some way told what they plan to do. They feel it gets them off the hook. So
yes, that's right. It's a weird system. It really is. But they tell you this, and the other thing is, this is another truth. You can only help yourself. Okay, you can't expect others to help you or do the work for you. In other words, if you want your freedom and your rights returned back to you, it's only you that can get them back. I can help, I can stand alongside you, but it has to be you. So it has to be you who says, no, I want my rights back. I'm going to exercise my rights. I want my freedom back. And I will help those people. I cannot help, and I'm going to say this, I'm not going to help people who will not help themselves. If they're just going to sit back and wait for others to do it, I'm not going to help them. All right. I want to see effort. I want to see someone say, look, I'm going to try and do a notice myself. It might not be very good. Doesn't matter. You've tried. Well done. And I will help you and I'll tweak it and I'll make it better. Not a problem. But you have to help yourself. You've got to get off the sofa. You've got to go and do it. Switch the TV off. Spend a few hours a week. All right. Just pick one evening and say, right, that evening I am going to do something. I'm going to do some promoting on social media. I'm going to do a notice. I'm going to contact my MP, whatever it is. But everyone has to do their part. You can't help people who will not help themselves. And also, I'll just quickly add, don't get into an argument with anyone. All right. So if you're going to talk to a sheep or something like that, and you talk about sovereignty and they start giving you negative whatevers, hypothetical, oh, what about this? Or without government, who would build the roads? End the conversation. Say, okay, it's not for you then. Not for you. Bye-bye. Thank you. And that's it. End it. Don't get into arguments. And don't get into arguments on social media. A lot of them are bots anyway, or the 77th Brigade.
That's right.
So if you see someone with negative comments on Facebook, go, okay, it's not for you. Bye-bye. So the Sovereign Project is not for everyone. It's only for those who are brave enough to stand up and stand their ground and want to learn this stuff. So if you want to do that, get in touch and welcome aboard.
I do just want to throw one question at you before we finish, because this came in from a listener. I mentioned on a video the other day that I'd be chatting to you, and somebody responded and said, could I put this question to you? So I just fire it to you quickly. This person asks, how do you reclaim your sovereignty in the common law while still having to operate in the everyday world of jobs, bills, etc.? Is it possible to have two identities running, or is it a 100% all-in commitment? The question might seem like I'm missing the point, but if there's a viable way to take steps rather than one massive leap that requires an entire life overhaul overnight, I'd really appreciate knowing. So can this be done in incremental steps?
Right. Okay. Yes, I can see the question. I can understand the question. Not a problem. They're just not on target. Being sovereign has got nothing to do with paperwork. It is a state of mind. Okay. So you can't just, it's like, I can't get a piece of paper and then this piece of paper now says I'm sovereign. It doesn't work like that. It's your state of mind. You have got to break your social conditioning. You've got to break that slave mentality, right? So you have to know it. It's a knowing. You know you are sovereign. And that means that no one has the right to tell you what to do ever. Okay? That's a state of mind. Once you are there, once you know it, and it's not a title, it is a status, it's a state of mind, okay? Once you know you are sovereign, now you can roll your sleeves up and go, right, now I know how the game is played, now I can get into the game. Your paperwork are your weapons, right? So you use your paperwork when someone tries to assault your sovereignty or your state or violate your rights. That's when you use your paperwork. So there's too many people out there think that they can get a piece of paper, sign it, send it off, and all their problems go away. No, this is not how it works. And you cannot hide behind paperwork. It doesn't work like that. You stand your ground, you become sovereign, which is a state of mind, and you know no one has the right to tell you what to do, and they can't take your money, they can't take your property. Once you know that, then you use your paperwork as weapons. So yes, you can work side by side with your new, if you like, paperwork sovereign status, right? Your sovereign status is your state of mind. But if you want to prove it in a court of law, unfortunately, court of law only deal with what can be proven and what can be written down. They only deal with paperwork in simplistic terms. So you would have your affidavit of status, which is a declaration that you are a living, breathing man and your status is as sovereign, okay? Then once it's filed, then if someone tries to challenge you using your legal identity, you don't say, that's not me. You put the burden of proof on them. So if your name is is Smith, and some council worker is saying you're Mr. Smith, you put the burden of proof on them. And you say, okay, prove it. Prove that I am Mr. Smith, okay? And they can't. Now, if they try and drag you all the way into court, then that's when you get your affidavit of status out. So here you go, I've got affidavit of status here. It says that my name is John from the family of Smith, and my status is as sovereign. So how can you apply that legal fiction to me? And that's how it works. Now, that's simplistic just because of limited time, obviously. But what you can do, once you know how this works, you will chip away and you will get rid of your driver's license. You will reclaim your car from DVLA, because obviously there is no legal requirement or contracted requirement for you to register your car. So you can unregister it, you take it off DVLA. You can then put your own deed on your own car using an affidavit. So then that means you do own your car now. People don't understand this either. They don't own the land that their house is on, and they don't own their house either. Because if you've got a deed to your house, first of all, it'll be in your legal name. It'll be Mr. Smith, which isn't you. And the house will be something like statutory residential property or something like that, which is a legal term, which then points it back to government again. So you have to get new deeds on your house if you want to own it. But you have to start with your own affidavit of status. So you start with that, then all your other affidavits come from that. You create new deeds, and yes, that does mean using ecclesiastical law, which is part of equity law. But if you know what you're doing, you can do this. So you take everything back step by step. And a little thing as well, speed cameras. I just want to touch on this. People, it's like the ticket you get from a speed camera. Well, ask yourself this. Do you have a contract between the person who put that speed camera at the side of the road and yourself? No, you didn't. So why does that speed camera have any jurisdiction over you? It doesn't. How can that person who put that speed camera there hit you with a fine? There is no contract between you and the speed camera. So when you understand it's all about contracts, and you begin to see it. It's like, again, like they live sunglasses. You lift it up and you see, I don't have a contract with this police force. I don't have a contract with a speeding camera. So these fines don't apply. And you'll find that your sovereign status increases. So hopefully that makes sense. Another thing as well, I'll just finish on this. You don't need a passport either. You can travel using an affidavit. So that's another way. You don't have to have a passport. You can do an affidavit status and you can travel through that. In fact, part of the sovereign project is we're trying to work on a sort of passport that gives you diplomatic immunity and it declares your sovereign status. It's very powerful. But again, I need numbers. Like 500,000 people join, we can get it done. Me on my own, it's very difficult. But yes, there is a way out, but it's a state of mind. I want everyone to understand that. State of mind, okay? The paperwork is just used as weapons. You cannot hide behind paperwork and you cannot be protected by paperwork. They are used as weapons to defend your freedoms and your rights. Hopefully that's made sense to people.
Sure. And your weekly workshop sessions, you mentioned there's obviously limited numbers, but there's some very valuable information being conveyed there. Do you film these at all and put them online?
We don't at the moment. However, I do want to turn them into videos. At the moment, it's a time constraint. I mean, I can only do so much. What I would try and find is someone who is local, maybe, lives in Leicester, who is possibly skilled in camera work, might have some camera equipment, and might be good at doing some editing. Because if someone is local to us and wants to help, then please get in touch and we'll set something up. And what I'd like to do is to do a series of easy, digestible, say 10-minute videos, like how does a mandate work, or how does a license work? I mean, there's so many people out there who don't even understand how licenses work. And why do you need a marriage license? Who are you asking permission to get married? I mean, it's insane when you think about it. It's like, why do you need a dog license? It's your dog. Why do you need a driver's license? It's my car. But so yeah, we are planning on doing some short videos, something that the average Joe out there could digest, because I understand that can be a little bit, you know, not full on, but if it's like I'm dumping all this information on people and it can be a bit too much. It's like overwhelming. If you don't understand what a legal fiction is, then you won't understand how common law works. But yes, if there's someone local and you know, is willing to use the cameras and do some editing, then I will be more than happy to do some videos. And we'll get some other people who will also do videos as well. I don't want it to be about me in front of the camera. Other people will also do that as well. So yeah, it is planned when we get more people who join the team.
Pete, amazingly empowering information today, my brother. Thank you for that. I have a feeling you're going to be very busy, even more busy in the coming weeks as this show gets shared around. But thank you for your time today, and thank you for your commitment and contribution with everything you're doing at this important time for humanity.
Anytime, and thanks for having me, Mark.
This is just for fun.
I'm picking up vibrations. I'm picking up